Hello everyone, welcome back to the Zach F1 channel, and in today's episode I'm going to be talking about all the potential chips you could be using in F1 Fantasy for Austria, and I will have time coded each and every section for if you just want to watch that one part, because say you've already used Limitless, you don't really need to watch the part of the video where I'm talking about Limitless. But anyway, let's get straight into it. So with that said, first up is Limitless, and like I said, I will build you a Limitless team, and this is what it looks like. It has Verstappen, Norris, Hamilton, Leclerc, and Piastri with Red Bull and McLaren. Now, Leclerc, I know a little bit scary in that Ferrari. However, I still think he's got a chance to do well in Austria. And again, with Piastri, he's very much interchangeable with Russell if you think he's going to do better. However, I do think Piastri really did screw it up. We saw in qualifying in Spain, he would have had a better race, and I think there was more points on offer with him, especially with how fast McLaren look. Piastri is a pretty nifty driver himself, so I expect him to be doing well in the next few races. So that is my Limitless team. Of course, Red Bull, the best constructor you can have, especially when you don't need to think about money, and McLaren looking like they're following suit. If you wanted another team, I'd then go Red Bull, Mercedes. However, I do definitely think Red Bull, McLaren are the way to go. And yeah, basically, I would recommend using Limitless this weekend. It's a really good option if you haven't used it already. I've already used mine in the sprint race weekend, but like always, it's a sprint race weekend. There's plenty of overtakes, so it's good for points. And then finally with Limitless, your 2-times driver should be Lando Norris, as we all know, even though it's not fair, he will probably get driver of the day. And even without fastest lap, he tends to beat out Max Verstappen to the most amount of points. Verstappen is a close second to the 2-times. However, Lando Norris looks like the better option right now. Then we move on to the Wildcard. Now, Wildcard's quite an interesting one because it really is very useful to have on a sprint race weekend. I don't think it's as useful as some other chips. You don't really get like points, if you know what I mean. It's not an extra DRS, it's not a Limitless, it's not a no negative. However, it's so crucial picking the right drivers for a sprint race weekend. So if you're really far away from a Norris plus a second premium driver build with Mercedes McLaren, for instance, or Mercedes Ferrari, McLaren Ferrari, and you still want to change your cheaper drivers, then I would recommend wildcarding. But I would recommend, if you've got free transfers and you can make most of your changes bar one, I would still do that. However, if you need to make like 4 or 5 changes to your team, it's a perfect time to wildcard. And if you get it right, you'll be sitting very much pretty. And especially at a sprint race weekend where you can pick your team after sprint qualifying, you can literally wildcard in the perfect 2-times driver, the perfect cheap drivers that you think are going to do well, and the perfect constructors. It's a really good weekend to use it. Then we need to talk about the final fix. So again, I'll talk about this in my live streams before the qualifying and in the race, but it's one of those chips that isn't actually much more useful at a sprint race weekend, because we see what happens in sprint qualifying, and the sprint race you get quite a few points. So yes, you could final fix then still get the qualifying and race points to see, but you sort of already know going into the sprint race who you should be picking. But like always with final fix, it really does depend on if someone like Norris, Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton has either a really good or bad qualifying. So if they had a bad qualifying, it's a race where you can overtake, you probably want to switch over to them because they're like, ooh, I could get a few points over here if you did it after qualifying. If you did it after the race, a little bit different. Said it's a weekend where you sort of know going into it because of sprint qualifying who's where. I'd be surprised if anyone needs to use final fix right now. Then we move on to autopilot, another chip which is extremely useful going into Austria, and one I'm sort of tinkering on the idea of doing. I don't know if I want to do it just yet. We'll see how the teams are looking when we get closer to the weekend, because especially on a sprint race weekend, if you get a 2-times driver wrong, you could be losing 30 to even 70 points, which is ridiculous. Imagine you lost out on Norris getting driver of the day plus like a podium position, and then he also gets those sprint race points as well. You're then looking at Lando getting around 60 odd points, and let's say you had Sainz and he only got 30 points, that'd be 60 points lost. So especially on a weekend like this, autopilot, again, if you had a Verstappen Norris build, it'd be better to use it then. However, there's more chips down the line you should be focusing ahead of. So even if you have a Lando Norris build plus a second premium driver, I'd recommend doing it. A little bit scary using autopilot if you've got one of the builds where you don't have a driver who's looking like they're going to get driver of the day. However, again, like we said, you don't have to do it until sprint qualifying, so you should be able to know who you're going to times 2. Although if it does look close and someone looks out of order, like maybe Ferrari look good, they could be like, okay, times 2 it, Lando and Leclerc, let's see who does better. It's still a good option. However, I need to specify this as if anyone has the one premium driver build that I was talking about in my other video, do not use autopilot. It's not worth doing it, of course, if you don't have any contention for that first place. So if you have a Verstappen single premium driver build or a Norris premium driver build, it's not worth it. It's only worth it if you have like Norris Leclerc, Verstappen Norris, Norris Hamilton builds. You get the idea. Then we move on to no negative, because basically the gist of it is the more racing we have, the more likely that there's going to be crashes, basically, or reliability issues. So it's always good. I saved 50 points in my Chinese Grand Prix from using no negative. It wasn't as good as Canada. So if there's a sprint race weekend, we've seen rain in Austria, where it's raining and it's a sprint race weekend, then you should be licking your lips, because that's definitely when you should use it. So again, it's one of those ones where I'd put it on the back burner if you've got other chips to be using, like Limitless, extra DRS. However, if it's raining, then we could very seriously be potentially looking at a no negative if you still have it. And then finally, we go on to the final chip you could be using, which of course is extra DRS. And this is a big one this weekend, as a lot of people, I believe, are planning to use extra DRS. Now, big disclaimer, because I am not using extra DRS, and I don't think anyone should if they do not have the Verstappen Norris build. So if you have Verstappen Norris with Mercedes or Ferrari, with Mercedes and Ferrari, you're fine. Any bigger constructors as well, Mercedes and McLaren Ferrari builds with Verstappen Norris, that's fine. However, you should not destroy your team by going Verstappen Norris builds, getting in constructors such as Haas or Alpine or VCarb to do the extra DRS. Then you're sort of shooting yourself in your foot, as you'll lose so many points for not having the constructors anyway. So I really need to push out, only be using extra DRS if you have Verstappen Norris builds, or let's say Leclerc looks good or Hamilton looks good, then Verstappen Hamilton. You need to have Verstappen plus somebody to do the extra DRS, because obviously you have 3 times and 2 times you need to put on both drivers. So especially for me, and I guess it will be for quite a lot of you as well, if you can't afford this, just wait till Brazil, which is what I'm doing, which is hopefully where we'll have enough team value to have caught up to at least have a Mercedes, Ferrari, Verstappen, Norris build, and then you could be happy to use extra DRS. But it's such a big chip where you could be getting 100 plus points in excess to everyone else. You really need to be careful about when you choose to use this chip. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching the chip strategy guide for Austria. I hope this helps you picking the chips that you should use this weekend. I'm most likely going to be using autopilot if Ferrari look decent this weekend. If they don't, I'll probably just be using it another weekend. However, there's a lot of chances for extra DRS, Limitless, no negative, Wildcard, final fix, the whole lot. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all later for the next F1 video.